Hey people, it's the voice in your head talking to you. This week we're doing something a little bit different. I figured since we've been trying out the gameplay style format for a little while now, I'd switch things up this week, and instead I'm going to do a narrative style review of the games that I'm playing after I've played them for a few hours on stream. So, yesterday I took a look at Vane. I played for about 4 hours on Twitch. You can see the VODs over there still. Now, I've got a lot of opinions on Vane. First of all, it's obvious that the game takes a lot of inspiration from two very big zombie survival IPs, DayZ and Project Zomboid. DayZ, it has a lot of the first-person interactive elements. It looks like they're going for the multiplayer route, the open world looting and base building, whereas Zomboid, they're going for the sort of realism factor, with lots of different meters to babysit, and lots of things you can do. However, it doesn't compete with either of those games at all yet. The game is still a demo, a very early demo, I would hope, but it does meet all of the technical requirements to be considered a game. I will say that much, at least. But what does the game have going for it right now? What can you see in the demo? Is it worth checking out? First of all, there will be a link to the demo down in the description if you want to check it out for yourself. Otherwise, there are the VODs of the stream that I did on Twitch with the game, so you can see about 4 hours of gameplay there. Now, let's get into the graphics first. They are decent. There's a lot of textures that are missing, or messed up, or overlapping. They're grainy and a little filmy, and there's a lot of post-processing film grain type stuff that's laid over the game to try and hide some of it, but it really ends up just hurting your eyes for the most part. In general, as far as the graphics go, there's nothing really unique about the game. There's nothing that really drew my attention or said, wow, that's a really gorgeous landscape I'm looking out at. Even when I climbed to the top of a massive radio tower and looked out over it, the landscape was nice, but it wasn't anything I hadn't seen before. A lot of the insides of structures and houses looked the same. A lot of them had the same trash, and there was a strange lack of blood everywhere. For a zombie game, this is probably the least gory one I've ever seen. There was trash everywhere, there was lots of stuff to break down, but not really any blood. When I first started the game, there was a lot of features that stuck out to me. First of all, the character creation. The character creation is also very unfinished. There's not a lot of customization options, the UI is very unfriendly, and overall a lot of the skills are still missing their implementation, so I wasn't really sure what I was doing with a lot of the stuff I was picking out. What did stick out to me the most was the debuffs that you could pick at the beginning. So you could, for example, make yourself super pale and make it easy to get sunburnt, or make yourself lactose intolerant. However, I didn't see those really implemented in the game either. I made my character lactose intolerant, and when I ate things that were milk-based, I got no debuffs or anything related to that. However, there were a lot of skills to choose from. There was everything from driving, to lockpicking, to stealth, melee combat, ranged combat, of course, all the typical zombie stuff, scavenging, driving, construction, crafting, but at the end of the day, a lot of them felt like they overlapped. And at no point during the game did I find myself using stamina. Like I do in a lot of zombie games, I put points into stamina, because running away and being able to keep your distance from zombies is very important, especially when being bitten can result in death. But even when I was flailing around in melee combat, I never saw a stamina bar, unless I was extremely sleep deprived. I also never saw a durability meter. The health meter at the top left appeared sometimes during combat, but it was never super obvious what it was. At first, I was confused whether it was my health bar, or my stamina bar, or just the durability of the weapon I was wielding. Frankly, it was unclear, and that was something that became a repetitive problem with the game's UI. Stuff was just unclear. I didn't know what I was doing. I didn't know what I was looking at. Another thing I noticed at the start of the game that got me really excited was the variety of items. I found trauma packs and needles and threads and elastic bandages and makeshift bandages. You get where I'm going with this. A lot of these items did the same things. When I would look at what they covered, all of them treated deep wounds, were any better or worse, there's no telling. So the variety of these items really just became flavor text more than anything else. And then you'd find tons of stuff that you had no use for or no idea how to use. And it wasn't just junk that you're supposed to leave there, it was stuff you're supposed to carry and break down. But you'd need specific tools. Problem was, game didn't tell you which tool you need. It would just say you need tool to break this down. You'd find shampoo, for example, but you don't need shampoo to clean yourself. You can just eat it. Which I did, mind you, but that's besides the point. Sunscreen and baby oil, for example. Of course, you could make your character super pale so that they get sunburnt, but at the end of the day, I don't really see a whole lot of reason for sunscreen in the zombie apocalypse. And if I have to wear sunscreen every time I go outside, that's going to be a frustrating game mechanic to deal with, to be certain. The baby oil I could rub on my hands for some reason. I don't know what that did for me, but I could certainly do it. It put up a little meter in my medical section that would tell me that I have oiled up my hands, and that was the extent of it. Speaking of the medical section, of course you had to keep track of your hunger and thirst, but another problem with the UI was thirst. The more thirsty you were, the lower your meter would be. The hungrier you were, the more full your meter would be. So it was confusing to me whether I was thirsty or hungry because the meters all contradicted each other. When it came to managing those meters, frankly, it was more of a chore than anything else. Finding loot of any kind was not hard. I found loot everywhere, and tons of it. The problem could have been that I was playing single player and this was expected to be a multiplayer game, but the amount of loot that I was finding was just absurd. It got to the point that finding new stuff was just another box I had to tick everywhere I went. The stuff I'd pick up, I would add to the pile and carry around. Speaking of piles, the inventory management. Ooh, the inventory management. Things are divided up into separate sections, of course, but at the end of the day, most of it was repeats. I found 3 or 4 flocks, they called them, which is of course a Glock, 2 or 3 different 1911s, and a ton of melee weapons. Speaking on the melee weapons, the first one that I found was a fork. Naturally, I assumed it would not be a very decent weapon to fight with. I tried avoiding combat until I was eventually cornered by a zombie and said, screw it, let's see how it goes. And then I realized that combat is way too easy. What are you gonna do now, huh? It's just too easy, man. As long as there's something in your hand, you're practically invincible. Once again, no stamina, nothing to stop me from spamming the attack button. At first, it was pretty comical, actually, to beat the snot out of a zombie with a fork, or cut their head off with a butter knife. But after a little while, it kind of took the fun out of it. The game seems to be pulling in a lot of different directions when it comes to its theming. For stuff like DayZ and Project Zomboid, you want the zombies to be extremely dangerous. It's all about the threat. With DayZ, you're constantly worried about players at your back, somebody picking you off from a rooftop. But there's not really a purpose to pick people off if loot is so plentiful that stealing from somebody else is more of a hassle than finding it yourself. And for Zomboid, the zombies just aren't threatening at all. As soon as you realize you can take them down with whatever you pick up, it's pretty much over. It's just a walk in the park from there. Another thing about the combat, it was really hard to tell the distance of the melee attacks. So it didn't matter much because you could keep spamming them and just walk closer and closer and they couldn't react, but there was no sense of impact when the zombies hit you. I took hits several times in combat without even realizing it. The scratches and whatnot that I had, I didn't even bandage half of them because I didn't realize I was hurt. The health bar appearing in the top left corner of the screen was really all I had to indicate that I was hit at all. Sure, they would swing now and then, but sometimes they would hit me in the middle of a combo. On the other hand, the gunplay was pretty decent. The aiming felt snappy, the sounds sounded good, and the reload animations were all of pretty decent quality. In your inventory, you would have to reload magazines by hand, 1 bullet at a time, which is fine for something going for realism, But the problem is, there was nothing to indicate how many rounds were in a magazine until you clicked on it. Once again, the UI needs a lot of help. At the end of the day, I wasn't really sure what I was doing a lot of the time. Again, demo, it's a proof of concept, so we'll give it a pass there, but these are all things that are going to need to be fixed. When it came to looting places, you found yourself just digging through a lot of junk. You already had, 300 cloth scraps back at home, so there was no point in you picking up random folders and papers that you would find laying around. You could, on the other hand, dismantle things to get more supplies, which you would bring back to your base and build stuff, which reminded me a bit of 7 Days to Die. Eventually, I did get myself settled down in a base in a construction yard, where I realized that the zombie animations and AI in general are also pretty low quality still. Several times, a wolf would start to chase me while I was driving my truck around, only to ram itself into my truck, which was sitting still, by the way, and kill itself. The zombies could see you and pathfind to you, but they had no way to deal with your flurry of melee attacks. If they were at a distance and you shot them, sometimes if they couldn't find a logical route to you, they'd just teleport or slide towards you. Other times they would reappear behind you to give your character the panic stat, and I have no idea where they came from, because most of the time, if the zombie was already present, you could hear them. Speaking of hearing, the sound was good. I'll give them that. The sound effects were all pretty decent, minus the melee combat sounds. The music sounded good, the ambiance was great, and in general, sound, music, quality of that stuff, all pretty decent. At the end of the day, though, the longer I played the demo, the more tedious it became. Once I started getting into base building, it became even worse. I found a construction site I wanted to keep as my base, set down my tool cabinet, and started filling it with resources. But to do that, there was a lot of transferring. It took me forever, because the inventory mechanics are infuriating. But putting that aside, I realized that a lot of the stuff that I thought I would need to build for a base, I really didn't. Rain catchers, rain barrels, containers, all that stuff, really pointless, because there is a porta potty nearby that not only I could wash myself with the water from, but I could drink it, I could clean my clothes, I could disinfect wounds. Literally all I needed was the infinite water spouting from a nearby porta potty. On top of that, I also found the crafting and cooking to be relatively pointless. As long as you rifle through a zombie's pockets after you knock them down, you're bound to find a piece of fruit or some bread every now and again. Frankly, the stuff that I ended up needing the most were antidepressants and alcohol, because my character was constantly stressed. Even though, he could walk through hordes of zombies with nothing but a whisk, he somehow managed to be constantly terrified. So, he was drunk a lot. My final sort of words on what Vane is. First of all, it's very ambitious. Taking on a project like this with a small developer is impressive. And you have to applaud the developers for the attempt that they're making. The demo isn't good, but that's okay. It's a proof of concept. It's proof that the game can be made, and to draw the attention of investors and those who want to support the project. But overall, the concepts are good. This is a solid base here. They have a lot of potential in this. It's just a matter of cleaning all of it up, because it does need a lot of cleaning. It needs a lot of fleshing out. It needs a lot of love and care and dedication to making this project what it could be instead of what it is right now. Because, as you probably know, we have tons of random zombie survival games, most of which aren't great. And right now, this is a passable version of those, but that's not what a developer wants for a game. They want their game to be better, or at least unique, from its competitors. So, we'll have to wait and see how Vane changes in the future. It's got a long way to go still. But that's it for me. I am the voice in your head. Thanks so much for listening, and I will see you again real soon.